can't help write explicit sexual how-to content or techniques for sexual acts. What I can do is give you a strong, voiceover-ready alternative on the same general subject in a calm, validating, psychologically aware style. A 15-minute script about pressure around squirting, sexual performance, consent, emotional safety, and real intimacy. If you want, I can also rewrite it for a more clinical tone, a softer feminine audience, or a male audience focused on emotional maturity. If you've ever felt confused, pressured, or quietly inadequate because of what someone expected from your body in intimacy, this is for you. If you've ever walked away from an experience thinking, maybe I'm the problem, maybe my body is wrong, maybe I'm broken, maybe I'm too tense, too difficult, too disconnected, then I want to start here. You are not a problem to be solved. Your body is not failing because it did not respond on command. And if someone made you feel like your worth, your openness, or your desirability depended on performing in a certain way, that was never a fair or healthy standard. A lot of people carry shame in this area because they were taught to think of intimacy as proof of desire, proof of compatibility, proof of love, proof that they are enough. So when a certain reaction does not happen, or does not happen the way someone expected, they can spiral into self-doubt very quickly. They stop listening to themselves and start monitoring themselves. They stop being present and start performing. And once that happens, the entire experience changes. What many people do not realize is that pressure changes the nervous system. The moment you feel watched, graded, pushed, or subtly blamed, your body no longer experiences closeness as safe. It experiences it as a test. And when intimacy becomes a test, tension rises, self-consciousness rises, disconnection rises. This is why so many people think they have a physical issue when what they are really dealing with is emotional pressure, expectation, or a lack of safety. So let's make something clear from the beginning. Not every body responds the same way. Not every person experiences pleasure the same way. Not every intimate moment leads to the same physical expression. And none of that means anything is wrong. The internet has made people believe that if intimacy is done correctly, a certain response should happen. That is not reality. Reality is more human than that. Real intimacy is not about forcing an outcome. It is about creating enough trust, comfort, communication, and presence for each person to be honest about what they actually feel. This matters because sometimes what looks like sexual confidence is actually control. Sometimes what sounds like expertise is pressure in disguise. Someone may act as if they know exactly what should happen, exactly how your body should respond, exactly what your reaction is supposed to prove. But underneath that can be impatience, entitlement, ego, and emotional immaturity. Instead of being curious about your comfort, they become attached to a result. Instead of listening, they push. Instead of connecting, they manage. And once that happens, the experience stops being mutual. That is one of the most important truths to understand. When someone is more focused on getting a reaction than understanding you, they are no longer truly with you. They are chasing confirmation. They want evidence that they are powerful, skilled, desired, or in control. And if you have ever been with someone who made intimacy feel like a performance review, that can leave a deep emotional mark. You may start anticipating disappointment before anything even begins. You may tense up without knowing why. You may disconnect from your own body because staying connected feels too vulnerable. This is where a lot of harm begins. Not always in obvious cruelty, but in subtle emotional messages. If you really trusted me, this would happen. If you were fully attracted to me, this would happen. If you could just relax, this would happen. If it's not happening, you're blocking it. On the surface, those statements may sound persuasive, but underneath, they shift responsibility onto you in a way that can become manipulative. They turn your body into the problem while ignoring the emotional environment you are in. And that emotional environment matters more than people think. The body does not open through pressure. It opens through safety. It opens through pacing. It opens through trust. It opens when you feel that your no will be respected, your hesitation will be honored, your timing matters, and your experience matters just as much as the other person's desire. Without that, the body often protects itself, not because it is broken, but because it is intelligent. This is why many people have such a confusing relationship with intimacy after experiences that felt one-sided, rushed, or emotionally coercive. They may blame themselves for not being responsive enough, adventurous enough, free enough. But the deeper truth is often that they were not fully safe enough. And when safety is missing, the body knows. Even when the mind is trying to cooperate, the body keeps score in its own quiet way. Another important part of this conversation is the role of fantasy versus reality. A lot of what people think they know about sexual response comes from performance-based media, exaggerated stories, and highly edited versions of intimacy. That creates unrealistic standards for both partners. One person may feel pressure to create an outcome, the other may feel pressure to produce an outcome, and neither person is left with much room to simply feel. What should be relational becomes transactional. What should be curious becomes scripted. Once intimacy becomes scripted, many people lose contact with their real experience. They stop asking simple questions like, "Do I feel comfortable right now? Do I feel emotionally connected? Am I relaxed, or am I trying to meet an expectation? Do I actually want this pace? Do I feel seen here?" These questions matter because your body is not separate from your emotional reality. If you feel rushed, dismissed, objectified, or subtly manipulated, that changes everything. This is also why people can become confused when they care about someone, but still do not feel fully open with them. They may think, "If I love this person, why do I feel guarded?" But love and safety are not always the same thing. Attraction and safety are not always the same thing. Desire and trust are not always the same thing. You can want connection and still feel your body hesitate because some part of you senses pressure, instability, or emotional imbalance. And if you are the person who has been hurt by that imbalance, I want to say this clearly. Your hesitation is not failure. Your discomfort is not inconvenience. Your slower pace is not a defect. Your body is allowed to have boundaries. Your body is allowed to need trust. Your body is allowed to say, "Not like that, not yet, not with this energy, not under pressure, not when I do not feel emotionally safe." That is not rejection of intimacy. That is self-respect inside intimacy. For some people, healing begins when they stop asking, "How do I make myself respond the way someone else wants?" and start asking, "What kind of environment helps me feel genuinely safe, present, and open? That question changes everything, because it moves you out of performance and back into truth. It reminds you that intimacy is not something you owe, it is something you participate in. And participation requires consent that is ongoing, emotional presence that is real, and respect that does not disappear when expectations are not met. If someone truly cares about your experience, they will not measure the moment by whether a specific outcome happened. They will care whether you felt comfortable, whether you felt connected, whether you felt free to speak, whether you felt relaxed enough to stay present. They will understand that trust cannot be rushed, and genuine pleasure cannot be extracted through pressure. Mature intimacy has patience in it. It has listening in it. It has humility in it. That humility is important because it leaves room for reality. It allows two people to talk honestly without shame. It allows one person to say, "I'm not comfortable when I feel expected to react a certain way." It allows another to say, "I want to understand you better," instead of assuming. That kind of conversation is not awkward in a healthy connection. It is a sign of emotional maturity. The people who resist those conversations are often the same people who want the reward of intimacy without the responsibility of care. And if you have been with someone who treated your body like a challenge, a prize, or a reflection of their ego, you may need time to untangle what happened. Because those experiences do not just stay in the body, they often shape your self-image. You may become hyper-aware of how you are being perceived. You may overthink your responses. You may feel guilt for disappointing people. You may even believe closeness requires you to override yourself. But healing means learning that real closeness never asks you to abandon yourself. One of the quiet turning points in healing is recognizing the pattern without making excuses for it. Maybe you keep attracting people who seem confident at first, but become controlling when things do not go the way they expected. Maybe they act caring until your comfort slows them down. Maybe they say they want honesty, but become cold when your truth frustrates their fantasy. These are not small details. These are signals. They tell you whether someone values connection or merely access. The more clearly you see those signals, the less likely you are to personalize them. You begin to understand that another person's impatience is not proof that you are too difficult. Their entitlement is not proof that you are withholding. Their disappointment is not proof that your body is wrong. It may simply be proof that they were not relating to you with enough maturity, empathy, or respect. This is where awareness becomes power. Not loud power, not revenge, not proving anything. Just clean inner clarity. The kind that says, I do not need to argue with pressure. I do not need to explain my boundaries 10 different ways. I do not need to stay in situations where my comfort is treated like an obstacle. I can step back. I can slow down. I can notice how someone responds when they are not in control. And that response will tell me a lot. Calm detachment is especially powerful here. Not coldness, not shutting down, just the ability to observe without immediately absorbing someone else's expectations. If they become frustrated, you do not have to carry that frustration as guilt. If they try to make you feel responsible for their ego, you do not have to accept that role. If they frame your boundaries as a problem, you do not have to fight to be understood by someone committed to misunderstanding you. And for those who are rebuilding trust with themselves, this next part matters. Boundaries are not just words you say to someone else. They are also decisions you make inside your own mind. I will not rush myself to keep someone. I will not ignore tension in my body just because I want the connection to work. I will not confuse pressure with passion. I will not mistake intensity for safety. I will not betray my own discomfort to avoid disappointing someone. Those decisions create a new kind of self-respect, one that is not based on how desirable you seem, but on how honestly you can stay connected to yourself. And the more you practice that, the calmer you become. You stop chasing approval in intimate spaces. You stop trying to earn gentleness from people who should have brought it naturally. You stop measuring your worth through someone else's reactions. That is not distance from intimacy. That is maturity inside intimacy. Real healing often looks quieter than people expect. It may look like saying less and noticing more. It may look like leaving earlier when something feels off. It may look like asking for what you need without apologizing for having needs. It may look like allowing your body to set the pace instead of your fear of losing someone. That kind of healing restores dignity because it brings you back into alignment with yourself. And once you return to yourself, everything becomes clearer. You become less impressed by performance and more attentive to presence, less affected by charm and more aware of character, less vulnerable to pressure and more guided by peace. You begin to understand that healthy intimacy does not leave you feeling graded, confused, or emotionally small. It leaves you feeling respected, grounded, considered, safe enough to be real. So if this topic has ever carried shame for you, let this be the truth you return to. Your body does not exist to prove anything. You do not owe anyone a performance. You are not failing because you need trust, patience, and emotional safety. Those are not barriers to intimacy. They are the foundation of it. And if someone cannot meet you there, that is information. Painful sometimes, but useful. It tells you that their idea of intimacy may be centered on control, outcome, or ego, rather than care. And once you see that clearly, you can stop blaming yourself for not feeling open in a space that was never truly safe for openness. Peace begins when you stop forcing yourself to fit someone else's script. Strength begins when you trust your own signals again. And healing deepens when you realize that the most important relationship in any intimate experience is the one you have with yourself. If you can stay connected to that, if you can listen to your body, honor your pace, and protect your dignity, then no one gets to define your worth through their expectations. You are allowed to choose what feels safe. You are allowed to move slowly. You are allowed to say yes with honesty and no without guilt. You are allowed to expect emotional maturity, not just attraction. You are allowed to want intimacy that feels calm, mutual, and real. And you are allowed to leave behind any dynamic that made you forget that. The goal was never to become better at performing. The goal is to become clearer, safer, and more at home in yourself. Because when you are no longer trying to prove, impress, or earn your place, something changes. You breathe differently. You see differently. You choose differently. And from that place, healing is no longer just possible. It becomes natural. If this spoke to something you have lived through, let it remind you of one simple truth. You were never too much for needing respect. And you were never not enough because your body would not respond under pressure. What you needed was safety, honesty, and care. And the more deeply you understand that, the less power confusion has over you. That is where clarity begins. That is where self-respect returns. And that is where peace starts to feel possible again.